How you doing?
Good.
What's up, buddy? Thank you, Jay. What happened? No taxes, Dan? Not for
Three different kinds of businesses and introducing it to the world. That's what we're about. And now that whole project is a question. That whole project is, in my view, on the brink. On the brink. Yeah. I think we're on the brink of the
Turn it up a little bit. I'll turn it up. But now, go ahead. Keep doing it.
Was that everyday life would get better. You set up a country where the people are in charge of the government instead of the other way around. And now in this moment, where after all of the things we've gone through for decades, for 250 years, it's not clear if that's going to work out. I think it will. I believe it will, if we do what we have to do. But that means reforming, tuning up, changing that political system. Because the problems in that political system help to explain all of the economic problems that I think so many Americans are living, where you've had enormous economic growth and shockingly little of it making it into people's pockets, where you have levels of inequality that we've almost never seen. And then the other thing is, there's the American promise, the system, the politics, the government, democracy, the America's gift to the world, creating democracy. But there's the economic version of that, which is the American dream, with the idea that no matter how you start, no matter who you are, you can come out ahead of where you started economically. That used to happen to 9 out of 10 Americans. Statistically, the place where you're most likely to live out the American dream right now is Denmark. And I want that to be America.
And systemically, if we just think from a high level, what is the essence of why Denmark is a better place for the American dream? What are the systemic problems? Is it with the current administration? Is it with a perspective on what a good life looks like in America? Or is it greed, or is it something else?
Well, I wouldn't say it's just the current administration.
So we're going to take a little bit of this
I think
off,
the current
too?
administration isn't helping.
And we're going to do it like the picture, right?
The problem is much deeper than that. A lot of it is, for the last 30 or 40 years, we've got policies in this country that make it harder to get ahead if you're not already starting out well off. Even just the way our taxes work. They tax work more than they tax wealth. That's really catching up to us. I mean, it has created problems, I believe it's created problems for decades. You can feel it in a different way. And when inequality reaches a certain level, and when the inequality of power follows the economic inequality to a certain level, that's when I think you start to have earthquakes in the society, what it feels like to live in this country. And I think we're going through those earthquakes. Not just Trump and everything he represents, but the rise in political violence, the collapse in trust in our society. All of these things, I think, are related to that. And we're running out of time to do something about it.
Trump made a lot of promises when he came into power. He won a bigger than expected victory, I would say. Why does he resonate?
Well, first of all, I think he speaks to a lot of people who know that the system has let them down. And even though I think he's somebody who really benefits from the system as it is, it's made him rich and kept him rich. You know, his message was, I'm going to blow it all up. And I think he's blowing up all the wrong things. But look, if the system's let you down, you're only going to vote so many times within that system before somebody comes along and says, I'm going to blow it all up. And you say, well, I may not even like the guy, but I'll give him a shot to see if that makes me better off. I also think he lied to a lot of people. Some people voted for him because they believed him. He's not going to start a new war. Many people voted for him because they believed him when he said on day one he was going to start lowering costs. And right now, inflation's higher than it was the day he took over. So these promises weren't true, but they spoke to something that I think a lot of people had on their mind that made a lot of people willing to burn things down. And there's a lesson for my party in that. I'm obviously passionately against many destructive things that he's doing. That doesn't mean the answer is to, quote-unquote, reverse the damage, put everything back where it was.
Because you're right that the Democrats have a lot of responsibility here. For a lot of reasons. I think the very fact that Trump was voted into power says something about how people felt with the previous administration, which was a Democratic administration. What responsibility does they have for getting the country to a place where they thought Democrats weren't the solution, because that's kind of, I think a lot of people thought that's just like more of the same.
Yeah.
Maybe people are getting increasingly, I think across the Western world, by the looks of it, increasingly tired of like politicians saying these like cute words and like we're going to help the working people and blah 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 and being very polished. And then you see these other figures that come in and say, I'm not a politician.
Yeah.
And as you say, I'm going to burn it down.
Yeah.
And for some reason, people are choosing that.
Yeah. Even though when they do, usually that person makes it worse. So that's why the president's unpopular. But the president is unpopular. To your point, that doesn't mean people are automatically going to trust Democrats.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, the answer to your question is yes, Democrats have a responsibility to present something that is better, not just better than now, but it's got to be better than before. The fact remains, a lot of these results have unfolded on, kind of regardless of losing power.
Are you going to run for president in 2028?
I don't know. I would have to believe, and this is how I've approached every time I decide to run for office. It's looking at everything that the office seems like it needs, not just generally, but in that moment. And then looking at what I bring to the table and asking myself, okay, am I bringing something that's different enough from what others are bringing and that fits at that moment? Like, that's what led me to run for mayor, which is a pretty unlikely move in South Bend, Indiana, when I was in my 20s. It's what led me to run for president when I did, almost 8 years ago now.
I'll use your own words here, Secretary. You said politics often favors someone who is completely different to the current leader, and that you could not be more different from Trump. I quote, an intellectual, young, gay mayor from the Midwest. You know, Amazon have this really interesting thing when they hire people, which we copy. Every time you meet someone, you have to vote one of four things. You either vote strongly not inclined, and strongly inclined. So you've got four options when you interview someone. We do the same in our company, and we took it from there. And the whole idea here is to prevent people from sitting on the fence, which is like, what is your inclination? So if I presented you with those four options as it relates to you running for president in 2028, as things stand, and this is just the balance of probability, are you inclined, not inclined, strongly not inclined, strongly inclined?
Would you like a water?
On these podcasts, nobody ever tells the bloody truth. This is why it's difficult sometimes to interview politicians, because we all have an inclination, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why you hesitate to talk in those terms is because you know, like, people are going to run with it, and you'll be just like using the day thing, and it'll, kind of dominate the next couple of days when you're trying to talk about something else. But
does the truth just not matter more though than the consequence of the truth in this regard?
yeah, but the truth about like what I'm maybe gonna do, like, there's a level of like not even being certain some of the things I'll have to weigh, like before having made a decision like this before. I can tell you that there's the
I need the inclination.
like I'm obviously not to one end or the other.
Yeah, because you're not those two.
I think I'm more inclined than not.
Okay, then I appreciate it.
But there's so much we don't know. There's so much I don't even know about what's going to happen this year, let alone what we need to know later. And this is not, the weight of a decision like that. I don't just mean like the national political weight, but just like the weight of the decision to run for office for you and your family, which frankly I did not fully understand until I had kids. That's changed all of my equations. It's just something that you really sit with and take seriously. Just shit.
One of the big things that people are talking about at this moment in time is the Iran war.
Yeah.
And this feeds into some of the points we were touching on around promises kept and not kept. What is going on in plain terms? Because Americans are getting lots of messages. You've destroyed everything in Iran, the military bases are all gone, and then we're back at war and American allies have been taken. Can you help us see through all of this?
I think what's going on is the president has painted himself and the country into a corner. There was a moment where it seemed to him that he was better off politically if we were at war. Even though he promised that we wouldn't be, even though a lot of his supporters didn't want the war, and certainly the American people as a whole don't want it. But he was under a lot of heat over cost of living, over the Epstein files, which was dominating the conversation every day, being proven to be as connected to an infamous pedophile as Jeffrey Epstein, and then doing everything he could to cover up disclosures about it, right? This is something that obviously was something that was creating a ton of heat on the president. Meanwhile, there's a lot of people in his ear every day, and some of them, from American politicians to people around the world, would really like to see him go to war. Why?
There's this machine. We can undo the apocalypse. You don't know what's out there. Only one way to find out. I can't stay in this universe! I'm gone! In case of a flat tire, a dead battery, or an empty tank, join AAA and get roadside support in under an hour and over 100 years of experience when you need it most. Sign up now at AAA.com/be-ready.
The most wonderful deals for teachers are here at Staples. Save big on classroom supplies all season long, plus 20% off to help teachers stock up and clean up. Because kids, that was easy.
Well, it's kind of the tradition of the Republican Party is to generally be more pro-war, right? My coming of age was at the time of the Iraq War. In fact, a big part of what kind of told me fully into politics was being opposed to the Iraq War.
One of the things that a lot of people won't know about you is that you did actually go and serve your country. I've got some photos of you here serving, and I think I've got your parents, I can post Afghanistan as well.
Yeah, that's the day I got back.
I just think it's important for people to know that you can speak to this quite accurately, having served your country.
Yeah, I know what it feels like to get on a gray tail airplane that's taking you into a war zone and wondering what's waiting for you there. Where we are now is a lot of troops are in that situation. They're in harm's way. And the president doesn't seem to have a plan. He can't explain why we're there. He said it's for regime change. He said it's for unconditional surrender. He said that it's to deal with their nuclear program, but last year he said they obliterated the nuclear program. And so there's a lot of reasons to suspect that we're just at war because he wanted us to. And now I can't figure out how to get us out of it. And it appears that any way forward leaves us worse off than we were before the war. Prices are higher. Troops have lost their lives. And it seems like the least bad options still involve Iran having more control over the Strait of Hormuz than they were asserting a year ago. Most Americans shouldn't have to be worrying about the Strait of Hormuz. They got enough to worry about. And a year ago, we weren't. That was not a problem. Whatever was going on in the Strait of Hormuz did not feel like it was a problem. Where I live in Michigan. And now it is.
Why though? What was the domino effect that caused him to go, do you know what? I think we can just go in there, decapitate the leader, and announce victory.
Obviously, this is a question for the president. But honestly, I don't fully understand why they would do something like this, especially because we know, you didn't have to be an expert in international affairs and security studies to know. If we actually attacked Iran, they were going to shut down the strait and try to cripple the world economy. It was literally the most obvious next thing that could happen. And yet, it seems like he either didn't understand or didn't believe. Surely he was told this. We know, in fact, it's been reported that he was told this. And he did it anyway. So how does that happen? I've long given up trying to see into the mind of this president.
Dare I say, if you are president in 2028, this could be your responsibility to resolve.
I really hope that the next president isn't facing this war dragging on into 2029. But, one thing we have learned is that it is harder to stop a war than it is to start one, which is why, if you have any other reasonable choice, you don't start one.
So what are you going to do if you are president?
Look, the next president will face a complicated, violent, and challenging Middle East and world map no matter what. And the next president's going to have to deal with that while dealing with a more assertive China and a dramatically, swiftly evolving security landscape, partly because of things like AI. Just as you and I are sitting here now, there's a lot of headlines about a big safety issue created by an AI model that was supposed to not even be able to access the internet, managing to get itself on the internet and hack into another company to get the answers to a test that it was told to solve, right? And that's as of today, in 2026. The things that could be going on by 2029 are surely going to change both what we're up against and what's possible. Look, in the same way that there was a nuclear hotline between Washington and Moscow, because it turns out, even while at each other's throats in a lot of ways, one thing that Americans and Soviets didn't want was to incinerate the planet. There's going to have to be some way for countries that do not trust each other today to coordinate on things like making sure AI doesn't lead to bioweapons being made by rogue actors or even individual actors, making sure that it doesn't lead to nuclear proliferation or any number of other problems, right, that can happen. So the security picture, I think, will be more challenging for the next president than it's been for any president since the Cold War.
So what kind of mentality or character experience do you think can meet those challenges?
Well, you need somebody who's deliberate and decisive. Those two things sometimes are in tension, because deliberation means you slow down and you look at what's going on and think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But decisive doesn't mean you immediately make a call every time a question is put to you. It does mean that you, once you feel like you've got enough information, you make a decision, you own the consequences of that decision, and you move on to the next decision. And I think in terms of kind of character and style, we're going to need both of those things. We're going to need wisdom, we're going to need judgment, and we're going to need judgment that is not twisted or changed or colored or biased based on corrupt reasons. And the reason I mention that is because right now we've got, for the first time ever out of all of our presidents, a president whose family is making billions of dollars for things that are sometimes directly connected to the decision of a foreign government, right? There was one case that put hundreds of millions of dollars into the family crypto fund of this president. You got Saudi Arabia investing in the first family's business interests to the tune of, I believe, a couple of $2 billion for the president's son-in-law, right? And we just can't afford, with everything that's on the line right now, to have the next president be someone who could remotely be influenced by those kinds of considerations, given everything that's on the line for the American people and for American security.
When you look at the picture in Iran, it's all well and good saying we have to get out of there. How?
No, the only good way to do it is to not be there in the first place.
Yeah.
It's too late for that. And so, as is often the case in difficult decisions that executives face, it will be finding the least combination of options, which probably means engaging a lot of other countries, a lot of regional partners, a lot of allies. Now again, the next president will be doing this at a big disadvantage because so many relationships with our allies have been burned. And it turns out you build relationships with allies not just out of friendliness or because it's neat. You do it because you're going to need each other someday. And the thing is, the more difficult the problem, just like life, the times I'm quickest to call a friend are the times when I'm hurting the most or feel like I need help the most, right? Same is true for countries. The tougher your situation, the more you're going to have friends you can count on. We're in a very tough situation in Iran. We will be for a long time. We need our friends.
Because you're dealing with a lot of, dare I say, very large ego leaders around the world. You've got your Putins. I don't even know who's running around at the moment. Then you've got China. Does it need a leader with a ego of the same size? Because sometimes I think crazy people kind of respect crazy people in a weird way.
I think a lot of different ways to deal with people like that. But I think the most useful is to earn a level of credibility. And when we're talking with allies, it's trust. When we're talking with adversaries, it's maybe not the same thing as trust, but it is credibility. That when you say you're going to do something or you seem like you're going to do something, you're going to do it. It means less energy gets wasted on guesswork. And it means you have just a little more stability. I think something all of us are looking for in the world right now is for it to just be a little more stable. And By the way to do that is not to like rewind and imagine that we can make the world look the way it looked in the 90s or the 50s. We're gonna have to find new ways to create a stable future. But look, there are as many different kinds of personalities in world leaders and presidents as there are in humanity in general. But it'll need to be somebody who, like I said, is deliberate, decisive, tough, and fair, and credible.
Yeah, the Iran situation is particularly uncertain for many reasons. In part because I don't know who the leadership there is anymore. In part because it seems like they will now control the Strait of Hormuz, or at least use it as leverage, really irrespective of what outcome takes place. And in part because you still have this nuclear threat, that they are probably now more motivated to develop nuclear weapons than they probably were under Obama when he signed that agreement with them.
Yes, they may have less capacity, but they certainly have more motivation at this point.
Would you let them develop nuclear weapons if you were president?
No, they should not be allowed to have nuclear weapons. A nuclear armed Iran, I mean, look at the malevolent activities that they already have pursued with conventional means, terrorist groups around the region and around the world. And this is not a regime, certainly not in its current form or anything resembling its current form, that could ever be trusted with nuclear weapons. Now, different presidents, each of the last few presidents, had a way of making sure that that never happened. The best way to do that was through diplomacy. That was the whole point of the Obama deal. The first Trump administration tore up the Obama deal, but couldn't get a better deal. And then when the Biden administration was trying to get a better deal, it was very hard to work across the table to get the Iranians to negotiate because they remembered that it was Trump who tore up the Obama deal, right? It's part of what I mean when I talk about credibility. It doesn't mean that people across the table have to like you. It means they have to have some sense that it's at least worth dealing with you, right? And there's not a lot of that, given that kind of instability, that pattern of use.
You know, I followed American politics, I think, since I was about 10. One of the things I've never heard mentioned so much in politics is Israel. It appears to me, as an objective observer, that the subject of Israel is now so central to politics. Why? What's going on with the US's relationship with Israel and the public sentiment towards Israel?
Well, it's getting a lot of attention because many very important things are at stake, and they've been put into conflict with each other, right? And each of those things is a valid thing, at least in my opinion. And then I'll name three. One, which has become very challenging for many Jewish Americans, is the safety of Jews around the world and in America. Theoretically, that could be separated from what's happening in Israel and Palestine. But in the real world, there's been a relationship between what's going on there and an explosion in anti-Semitism that has many American Jewish families afraid for their safety. Another thing is the safety and dignity of Palestinian people who, in Gaza, but not only in Gaza, have been subjected to horrific violence and, in my opinion, war crimes. And alongside that, there's the safety and dignity of people in Israel who we have a security relationship with as a country and have since the Jewish state of Israel was founded. The future and survival of Israel as a Jewish state, and a country that is still responding to the worst day of the most violence against Jews since the Holocaust. Those three things, I believe, in principle, can be honored at the same time. In fact, I believe in principle they have to be honored at the same time.
Is that what Netanyahu wants?
No, I don't think he is remotely interested in the safety and dignity and security of Palestinian people. I think he believes that he would be better off if they didn't exist. Or at the very least, he doesn't want them around a little bit, right? And so we see a policy which obviously has led to what it did in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, which gets less attention, maybe because there's been fewer deaths there, but pretty horrific behavior and conduct and violence from settlers. That is part of a project of making it impossible for there to be a secure, viable Palestinian state.
Knitted to the rescue.
Sell what your kids don't need and earn some extra money back. Quick snap. Upload your toy and sell. Sold already. Now on to the next one. If you don't need it, sell it. Download Vinted and start selling today.
69% of Americans don't understand what this word means. See, compounding is when the money your money makes starts making money too. Hard to picture? That's why we built the Acorns Potential Screen. When you start investing with Acorns, the potential screen shows you how your money can grow over time. You can switch your contributions, turn on roundups, or even make a one-time deposit right there. Download the Acorns app to start investing in your potential today.
So what does Netanyahu want in the region?
Well, I don't know that I'm much more capable of seeing into the mind of Netanyahu than I am seeing into the mind of Trump. But looking at his choices, it seems that he wants to be able to assert domination of any other regional player, and something that is beyond just security and safety for the people of Israel, which is something that I believe in and something I think is hard to argue with, but something else, which is a project of taking over what is called Greater Israel in his ideology, in his worldview.
Greater Israel.
Yeah, Eretz Israel, which is a vision that does not have a lot of room for Palestinians anywhere between the river and the sea. He won't say it in those terms, but if you look at his actions, it is hard to believe that he is comfortable with anything less.
What's your take on how Trump has treated Netanyahu in that relationship? Is that the relationship you would have had?
It's not the relationship I would have. I think, like all things with Trump, it's pretty transactional. It's instrumental. It's what's in it for me. And I think part of how that has developed into a frenemy relationship now is that the relationship that maybe served him well politically is not so good for him now. Because, among other things, Netanyahu has an interest in a continued U.S. presence in the Iran war that has gone from being something Trump thought would be politically useful for Trump to something that is politically dangerous for Trump.
How do you think this plays out, Secretary? What do you think happens? You know, I said there, I sort of hypothesized that by 2028 this will still be dragging on. From my perspective, you're either going to kind of lie to the American public and say that and declare some kind of victory, or you're going to stay in there. Yeah, I can't actually see a third option personally. So how do you imagine this playing out?
Well, there's got to be a way to get out of Iran. Like, we just cannot. First of all, the president has already backpedaled a lot, even though he would never admit it, on what we're there to do. Because he said unconditional surrender, that's not happening. He said regime change, regime hasn't changed. We went from Ayatollah Khamenei to Ayatollah Khamenei Jr. At least on paper. Who knows if the guy's alive? But the regime is alive. But the regime's entire ideology is based on hating the United States, right? And now that the United States has done this, hard to believe that's going to change. There will have to be an exit that is very unlikely to be the unconditional surrender that Trump promised. But it has to be something that is tolerable to this country, to our country, to Americans, which includes passage through the Straits of Hormuz. And the only way to do that, I think, is with a lot of international partners who want the same thing to happen. Remember, anyone east of Iran is feeling more economic pain, even than we are, from what's happening in the Straits.
China and
Yeah, because East Asia relies on oil and goods that go through there more. So I think what you're going to have is a regional and international partnership that ensures something at least resembling free passage of goods and security, without the U.S. sending troops in there or continuing to be at war. It seems like the only way, but it's unquestionably worse than where we were a year ago before the war started.
Did you hear recently that Trump mentioned, I think it was at the G7 summit, we run out of reserves about 4 weeks. You know, there are reserves all over the world, and we would really run out, and there'll be time when we wouldn't be able to get it. It would be bedlam. And he made these comments last month, 2026, at the G7 summit, in regards to the amount of oil the United States have left in the reserves. I think he was framing it around why he signed this memorandum of understanding, this agreement with them. But, in the last week, we've gone back to war and the Strait of Hormuz appears to be closed again. Right. So when we think about oil reserves and how that impacts ordinary Americans and what might be around the corner, there's a real pressure here to find a solution and to find a course.
Yes, I mean, look, this is why he signed an MOU that was frankly more on Iranian terms than American terms. I mean, the ceasefire, so-called ceasefire, emerged from a deal that was really us responding to what Iran came up with, not vice versa. Again, he said he was out for regime change and unconditional surrender. We're not even talking about that anymore. We're nowhere near that. And now we have a set of conditions. It's us redlining their text, not the other way around, right? And then he's trying to figure out how to go out and sell that. And so he points out something that is true. Sometimes he tells the truth when it serves him. And when he was trying to explain why he backpedaled on his war goals, the way he explained it was by admitting that there was a level of economic vulnerability that was unleashed by closing the strait, which is what Iran did to respond to attacks, right? But the problem is that ceasefire is not happening, at least not as you and I are sitting here right now. Still a hard thing for them to admit. In the same way that he took out a Sharpie to modify a hurricane map rather than acknowledge that he was mistaken about some detail during a national disaster once. His administration deleted 4 names from the ranks of those killed in action in this conflict because they were afraid that listing their names would contradict him saying that we had a ceasefire.
Really?
Yeah. At least that's the only explanation I can think of. The crazy thing is all of us know there's a war. We even had moments, remember, I think it was Secretary Rubio said in Congress, where there's punishment for lying. It's the lie to Congress. He said the war's over. We all know the war's not over.
Are they stuck? Because they seem a bit stuck to me. I was watching Heg 7 in front of, I think it was Congress, it was Congress the other day, and they're just repeating his quotes back to him over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, because how is he supposed to explain that we're in a war that supposedly we already won?
Do the after picture.
That we're not getting any of the things that were supposedly worth going to war over. And that the bill for this keeps getting bigger in terms of tax dollars. I think his latest number was $37.5 billion. It's our money, all of us as American taxpayers. And of course the cost in lies. And the cost in terms of everything in America, starting with gas, being more expensive. They don't want to be explaining that, right? But they don't have a great way out either. And they're not prepared to lead us to a better place because they don't even know what it looks like.
Is there anything you respect about Trump?
Sure. I think he has been able to create the impression of a bias for action. And I think he gets a lot of credit for that. I think in general, and especially in government, there's a lot of hand-wringing. Like, oh, we gotta have a 19-step process to get all of these things. I saw this during my 4 years trying to get stuff built in this country as Secretary of Transportation, that there were so many hoops and so much red tape. And he comes in and he says, like, don't not do that, we should do this. Now, often what he's doing turns out to be illegal and it gets reversed. And obviously most of his policies are terribly destructive. But